Hello. Good day, everyone. We're just waiting for more people to come in, but while we're waiting, can we ask everyone to please just rename yourself with your organization if that's possible. So just your name and then the organization that you're with. That'll be easier for us. Thank you. Awesome. We'll just give a few more minutes for other people to come in and then we'll start. Hi, Marvin. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Vinny. Great. We'll just maybe have 2 more minutes while we're waiting. Again, for those who haven't yet, if you can please rename yourself with your organization. So just like what we have on the screen from Dissa, Caitlin, me, Tess, if we can just have our organization right next to our name so that we know. Thank you. Right, we'll give 1 more minute, then we'll start. Great to see everyone here. It's a great mix of people. We have some people from Southeast Asia, from South Asia, and also from Sub-Saharan Africa. Great. Awesome. All right, I think we can start our session for today. So good day, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today for our session around no-nonsense advice on enhancing gender equity in impact incubation. We are really happy today to have our two guests here who will help us go through the GLIA toolkit, so gender lens in incubation and acceleration toolkit. So it'll be a fun session where we get to go through the context of how the toolkit was created, as well as to have a bit of understanding of how to use the toolkit. So this is going to be a 2-part series, and I think most of us, if not all here, are members of the network. So in the second part, which is a members only session, we will have a deeper dive of the GLIA toolkit. So it'll be great if you're not members yet, to apply it for membership. But if you are, then it'll be a member benefit for you to join us on the second part. So just to get us started, as always, I will just present on my screen our mentee. Let me copy the link on the comment box real quick. So there, just share my screen. Dissa and Caitlin, feel free to join us on the Menti. So as always, please let us know which country are you joining us from. I see a good mix of different countries today. My apologies, I didn't get to share the link. Here you go. Awesome, Philippines. Yes, I see some people from Vilgo, Philippines here. Nice to see you from Japan. Awesome. Australia, great. India, awesome. So we have a big crowd from the Philippines today. Awesome. Ghana, great. All right, we'll move on to our next question for now. Welcome, everyone. So next is we just want to, okay, Vinny is from Malawi, awesome. Just the idea, what best describes your organization? I'm, from the names that I see, all of you seem familiar to us, to me at least. I think most of the people here are incubators and accelerators. Great. Awesome. All right, so we do have a big crowd of incubators and accelerators today. All right, so let's get into more of the meaty stuff for our check-in. What's one word that comes to mind when you think about gender inclusion and impact incubation? So feel free to have more than one word to share, but if you think about gender inclusion and impact incubation, what's one word that comes to mind? So women, diversity, justice, inclusivity, awesome. Great words, belonging. Really interesting responses, a safe space, inclusive, awesome. Diversity, equity, great. Level playing field, great. Great responses. We'll move on to the next one, growth. Yes, definitely. What aspect of gender inclusion are you most interested in learning about today? So this will give our speakers, especially Caitlin for today, kind of an idea of what would be the best to kind of for us to focus on today. Ooh, it seems like it's a level thing. Challenges and solutions, best practices, and tools and resources. Okay, great. Okay, it seems those three are top three for today. So challenges and solutions, tools and resources, and best practices. Awesome. So for those who have just joined us, we are on the Menti and we are just answering some questions. Please feel free to join us here, or you can also just chat if it will take too much time. Awesome. Okay, and then our last question for our check-in: what is your biggest challenge related to gender inclusion in your programs? So any big or small challenges that you've come upon as organizations who have already, for example, tried to incorporate gender inclusion in the past or in the present? Lack of pipeline in some of our programs. People are not trusting. Impact data is rarely collected by entrepreneurs, much less gender disaggregated data. Awesome point. Audience reach. All right, awesome. I think this will give us some information to work with, and we have some time later to do some question and answer. So please feel free to ask once there's more addressing unconscious bias and pipeline beyond urban areas. Okay, definitely some very valid concerns and challenges that organizations have faced. Thank you so much for answering our mentee, and to not take too much time anymore from our intro, and that we can get started. I will pass it on to Disa from Sasakawa Peace Foundation, who will introduce our speaker for today and give us a bit of a context on the GLIA toolkit. Disa, please take it away.
Thank you, Rod. Hi, everyone. I'm Disa from Sasakawa Peace Foundation. Sasakawa Peace Foundation is a think tank and also a foundation based in Japan. And I've seen some of our partners from the Philippines as well. Shout out to Filger Philippines. Yay. I wanted to briefly give a bit of a context of why we are here, and also wanted to say thank you for Rod for actually reaching out to us to make this event a reality. And also Caitlin from YGAP. YGAP has been our partner in developing the GLIA toolkit from in 2019, 2020. So just to give you a bit of a context that our foundation is working with entrepreneurs in mainly right now in Southeast Asia, focusing on promoting gender equality and social inclusions. And I'm in charge on projects in countries such as the Philippines and Indonesia. And at the same time, I'm also a social entrepreneur. And for the past 9 years, I have been working with the deaf community in Indonesia to build a social enterprise that provide inclusive job opportunities for people with disabilities. So as an entrepreneur, I'm very thankful for the work that you do, for the work that accelerators, incubators, and entrepreneurship support organizations do to provide resources and access to us entrepreneurs worldwide. So I was very happy when Rod contacted us, now that I'm with SPF, and so that we can support more access to this resource. And actually, SPF together with YGAP developed the GLIA toolkit in 2020, and the toolkit is a free interactive resource that provides practical tools, strategies, and real-world case studies to support making the work of incubators and accelerators more accessible and inclusive to all gender. And it has been a collaborative effort, and we have significant contribution from ESOs in Southeast Asia, some of whom will be discussed today by Caitlin as a case study. So organizations such as Filger Philippines, Make Sense, New Energy Nexus, and She Investments in Cambodia have played a crucial role in pilot implementation, making the toolkit as a success. And we hope not only Southeast Asia, but ESOs and impact enablers in other regions are also interested in applying GLIA toolkit in their work. And one thing I love about this toolkit is that it encourages us to foster a community of practice where you can share learnings, challenges, and successes of applying gender lens to your work. So hopefully today's session can serve as an entry point for all of us to support each other, creating this community of practice and implementing entrepreneurship support projects with a gender lens. So I'm very excited about today's session, and I would like to welcome Caitlin from YGAP to guide us and help us learn more about the GLIA toolkit. Thank you so much. Caitlin, take it away.
Thanks, Disa, and thanks, Rod. Excited to be here today to share a little bit more about the toolkit. I will share just a few slides with you to start, and then we're going to dive straight into the live demo of the toolkit. So just give me a second while I share my screen. So just as a brief background on myself, I guess I am the co-founder of YGAP. I currently oversee our program and learning design, and have been involved with GLIA for the past few years, overseeing the capacity building program that we ran with 12 ESOs across Southeast Asia, and also ran a Train the Trainer program, as well as the community of practice. So it's been a long journey with SPF, and we've really enjoyed getting this toolkit out there. before we dive into sort of the benefits of the toolkit and exactly what it does, I thought I'd just first address, what does it mean, to apply a gender lens in incubation and acceleration. So we acknowledge that entrepreneurship is an uneven playing field. It's not equally accessible by or inclusive of people of all genders. So through the toolkit, we want to address these issues to make support more inclusive and making entrepreneurship more accessible. And by doing that, we can realize the full economic and impact potential that comes from engaging all genders equally. So as intermediaries, which we all are, incubators and accelerators, we work directly with and deeply with these entrepreneurs, as well as the ecosystem around the entrepreneurs, right? And so by doing that, we're in a really unique position of power. So we can actually have a bit of leverage and be able to drive and influence gender equitable change. So, and we can do that by identifying and solving for these disparities and gaps that exist between different genders. So that's essentially sort of why, or, what the toolkit is aiming to do, and is to leverage that power that we have as intermediaries to make a change around gender equity in this space. So now I want to talk a little bit about, what is the impact of applying a gender lens? And the toolkit's broken down into 3 sections. So we look at within your organization, within your program, and within the ecosystem. So by applying a gender lens to our organizations, we know that achieving gender equity, diversity, and inclusivity can help us better understand customers. We can make better decisions, we can perform better financially, be more competitive and innovative, and become better at attracting, selecting, and retaining talent. And also, obviously, it's at the moment, especially a good strategy for attracting more funding. There's a lot of funding out there for gender equity. So lots of benefits there around making sure that our teams themselves and our organization is gender inclusive. And we can, I'm sure you've all been across the data that backs this up, that as more diverse teams, we have more successful and more financially profitable organizations. Within our programs, by applying a gender lens and achieving a more gender diverse program, we're able to ideally attract and better support those diverse entrepreneurs who are building the businesses of today and tomorrow. We can increase innovation. So we know that including diverse voices leads to better innovation. And we can encourage the entrepreneurs that we all work with to consider how they can advance gender equity through their own products and services and how they run their businesses. And finally, as in terms of ecosystems, as I said, we have that unique power. So we can actually influence others in the ecosystem to consider and implement those gender inclusive practices. And that can really accelerate the positive impacts of our work. So that can lead to reduced income disparity, increased social equity, and contributing to social sustainable development, and increased resilience for our ecosystems against financial and environmental crises. So that's sort of the impact that we can have in an ideal world of applying a gender lens to our work. And Disa spoke a little bit about exactly what this toolkit is, but as she mentioned, it's an interactive resource, and it's really to help us uncover how all of our activities as a accelerator or incubator are experienced by different gendered groups. It equips us with the mindset, strategies, and frameworks to amend and improve our organizations and programs to make sure that they're as accessible as they can be and as inclusive as they can be of all genders. And by the way, the other beauty of this is the processes that this takes you through, this toolkit, can also be used to consider, how your activities are experienced by, other diverse founders. So it might be different ethnicities or different abilities, the same process that we go through to consider how different genders might experience our program differently can be applied to other diverse founders. So I think that's an important thing to remember as we all look to broaden our definition of inclusivity. So the GLIA toolkit, as Disa shared, it was very much a collaborative effort. And it was really designed, in collaboration to support eventually, more women-led businesses and social enterprises across Southeast Asia to develop products and services and workplaces that worked better for women. So that was sort of the initial goal. And it was, lots of organizations piloted the toolkit and applied it to their organizations and were able to test it out for us and give feedback on what was most helpful, what challenges they experienced. And you'll see that in the toolkit through a lot of the case studies that we include there. So what I'd like to do now is just shift over to the live demo of the toolkit. So hopefully you can see it there now. So this toolkit, this is the website, so you can find it at gliatoolkit.com. And this is the homepage. So I'll show you that first. We've got a little introduction here, and you can watch a little bit of a video intro. And we talk about kind of how we can influence or how we can apply a gender lens, both directly and indirectly through influencing others. You have two ways of navigating the toolkit. So you can move through the toolkit here, and you can begin a section here, and then you can move down at the end of that section, and it'll say sort of continue, begin the next section, and you can move through organically like that. The way I prefer to move through it is this handy little content map up here. If you go to the top menu and click content, you'll be able to see essentially the toolkit on a page and all the different areas. So this is where you can see the introduction, how to use the toolkit. You can read a little bit about the impact report and the impact the toolkit has had. Then we have those three sections. So organization here is this light green color, program is this darker green, and then this blue is this ecosystem. So then toward the end, we have a whole section on measurement. I did see that come up as something that people are interested in, which I will show you, where you can find a whole list of gender metrics if you are looking to measure the impact of efforts you're making to be more gender inclusive. And then there's some other bits here. What I wanted to do was jump into a couple of these sections and just show you where some of these great resources are that can support you as you move through using the toolkit and applying it to your organization. So first of all, this organization section, as you can see, it talks about how you can apply a gender lens to your board, to your team, and to your culture. I'm going to jump into this team recruitment section to show you a couple of examples and frameworks that are really useful. So each section will identify what is the key problem maybe that you might be facing if you're looking at team recruitment. So, this problem here is mentioning that bias is still present in a lot of our recruitment processes. And if we don't have the right processes in place, that can affect and disadvantage certain gender groups. So what is the desired outcome, and how can we measure this? That will link to those indicators that we've got there. And we talk about why it matters. And then the really juicy stuff is in these strategies. So this is where you're going to find sort of individual tips and strategies that you can use in order to increase, or in order to try and get to this desired outcome. So for example, there is a value statement that you can include in job descriptions, and we've got an example of that there. We have a framework for writing gender neutral inclusive position descriptions. And then we have a selection criteria for team members. and an example of bias training. So and a framework for running a blind selection process. So those are all really practical frameworks and examples that you can grab. I'll show you a couple of them now. So is that opened up in the right? Can everyone see that framework?
Yes, we can.
Cool. So this framework, as you can see, talks about the objective and the key outcomes and why it matters. And then it talks about exactly how can you, like, what's the process you can take to create a clear selection criteria for team members. That's one example. I will show you this other example here. The framework or here's the example of a value statement and a job description. So you can see here in Criterion Institute, it shows exactly this wording here of what their value statement is when you go to apply for a job with them. So like I said, really practical tools, and they are a little bit hidden in these strategies. So I like to show people exactly where they are, because sometimes people miss them. And these are the really practical tools that you can just grab and sort of take and apply immediately. So that's a little bit on the organization. If we jump into programs, the other one I wanted to show you was, so we've obviously got the different sections of your program. So you've got your recruitment, your selection, program design, program delivery. And if we jump into the selection process here, you can see this is where we might be selecting more of one gender than the other. How do we make sure that it's an unbiased selection process? Again, there's a selection criteria for entrepreneurs there, and how to run a blind selection process for entrepreneurs, and a framework for reviewing interview questions and processes. So I'll show you that one quickly. Again, it's just looking at some good reflection questions around, how much are all interviewees asked the same questions? How do we currently assess whether an answer is good or bad? Making sure that you have a really consistent way of marking and assessing each applicant in the same way. Having diversity in the interviewees. So lots of good tips and guidance there around how to make sure that process is really inclusive and bias. The last section I will show you is this ecosystem section. So again, this is looking at how we as intermediaries can influence other ESOs, investors, mentors, the government, on how they can help be more inclusive of all genders. And mentors is a good one that I'm sure we all are having to think about in our programs. So there are definitely interesting power dynamics that exist between mentors and entrepreneurs, especially when they're different genders and depending on the local cultural and societal norms, right? So there are some challenges there that might exist. So how do we make sure that our mentorship program is addressing those, or is inclusive and aware of some of those power dynamics? And so you can see here, we've got an example of an awareness training, which is looking at, it's got an agenda that you can use for an awareness training that you might like to run with your team or with your group of mentors. So that's a really practical session that you can pick up and run with. We also have here an example code of conduct. So again, if you click through to this, there's an example that you can copy if you don't have a code of conduct already in place. So yeah, lots of great starting points for you if you are just starting out on this journey of applying a gender lens and making sure you're ticking all these boxes. A couple of other things I did want to show you before we jump into the case studies is the mail, and also where you can find the PDF version of the toolkit in case you don't like working digitally. There is a spot where you can download the PDF. So down here, I believe it's on the home page at the bottom somewhere. Let me find it. Oh, maybe not. Oh, I know, it's in how to use this toolkit. So if you jump in here, you'll be able to, if you prefer taking it offline, you can download the PDF here. So that essentially shows you that whole content map, but in a PDF. I find it easier to jump in digitally and move through the sections I know I need. But if you actually just want to read the whole toolkit in full, that's a good way to do that, is to download the PDF. On the homepage, though, is where we will find, actually, let me jump before we go to the homepage. I will show you this gender and impact measurement section. So as I said, I know I saw that on the list of interests. And this takes you through kind of how to get started on measuring your efforts, choosing your indicators, collecting data, and there's a whole measuring gender equality PDF here that this was like a second part of the toolkit we added later. So that's there for you to download and move through if you like. Let me see, where is the choosing the indicators is, we've actually recently migrated the website from one domain to another. So there's a couple of broken links we're working on fixing. This should get us there though. There we go. So if you come down here, choosing your gender indicators, this is where you can find a whole list of example indicators, which I think is another really great resource for you. So it's split up by your organization, essentially the same categorizations that the toolkit is broken down into. You can find both qualitative indicators and quantitative and qualitative for each of the sort of main outcomes that you're ideally aiming to reach under each of these sections. So this is a great resource if you're looking for measurement information. And I think there's one final thing I wanted to show you, which was, let me see, I think it's actually back. Sorry for jumping around. I think it's back in how to use the toolkit. There is a great self-diagnosis tool here. So if you are just starting out, or you think you've got a good start, but you want to know exactly where the key areas you need to work on, that self-diagnosis tool you can download and answer and kind of rate yourself on a number of different areas, which will then also help you determine which parts of the toolkit you want to focus on for your team. There is also one other exercise. I think that might be back in organization. So there's also example run sheets for sessions you can run with your team or with entrepreneurs on gender. So this one is a gender empowered training. I will find the other exercise that I'm thinking of, but in the meantime, I'm going to jump to the case study for now. So where the other place you can find all the case studies, actually it's on the homepage. So if you scroll down to the bottom here, you can see we've got read more case studies here. And this is where you can read about how each of these ESOs or intermediaries have applied the toolkit to their organization and what the outcome has been and what the challenges were that they faced doing that. So we're going to have a look at exchange here in the Philippines. So this particular organization, you can see here why they decided to use the toolkit. They had a sort of not as many women founders, and then they also were looking at they just didn't have an intentional application of gender lens. So they also did some investing work. So is this the right one? Is this the one? Yeah. So they also worked with Criterion Institute to look at how they could apply a gender lens to investing. And so the key sort of outcomes that they wanted to focus on were the composition of their board, their recruitment and composition training of their team, their culture, and then their investment principles, and the mentor program, and then how they engage with the broader ecosystem. So they were actually trying to attack quite a lot. We would usually recommend, if you're just starting out with applying a gender lens, to choose maybe one or two of those things. But they went for quite a few there. And these are the 3 kinds of activities they wanted to undertake. So to begin with, they wanted to look at awareness and knowledge building within their team. So they were hosting these brown bag lunches to facilitate conversations around gender issues and how that might have implications for their work. So that was one sort of, more sort of broad around the culture in their organization and how they could create those conversations to shift the culture and understanding of gender within their team. They also went through a process of collecting data. So encouraging the team to reflect, think about any feelings, doubts, insights that they have around gender, and then they could look at where are those gaps in their processes and activities that they should be applying a gender lens to. And then they had sort of a visioning and application activity. So this was where they then, with their team, sat down and said, how can we bring these values of gender equity and diversity into our operations? And so they had a planning strategy session around that. The key toolkit, areas of the toolkit they use, they said they sort of reviewed it all in full and then dive deeper into certain sections to help them facilitate those sessions they ran with their teams. So, they use the glossary of terms in that brown bag lunch, or they'll use some of the reflection questions that are throughout the toolkit to start those conversations with their teams. In terms of the challenges that they encountered, they said that awareness and knowledge building piece was going to be initially run by an outside expert, but they sort of did it themselves in the end because they couldn't find that person. So they did some self-study, and then they ran sessions, and they did say that shorter time frame made it difficult for everyone to complete the work that they had assigned. So during the sessions, some contributed more or less. So there was a difference in kind of the level of comfort that people had with sharing and discussing this. So far, out of all of that work, they feel that they came out of this experience with a much better understanding of what it means to apply a gender lens. And they've identified those areas that they needed to focus in terms of where to apply a gender lens. And they sort of acknowledged that the brown bag lunches were not enough, but it was a really nice first step. And so, that's kind of that was a little bit of reflection on their challenges and where they were at. And then these are some learning. So, they encourage you, if you're thinking about going through this process, to really take stock of where the organization is at and understand what the needs are before you go about applying the gender lens, and know what objectives you're wanting to get out of the process, which is where that self-diagnosis really comes in handy, because that you can go through that self-diagnosis with your team and identify where are the key areas that we need to focus on or that we're not doing enough of. And then there's clear objectives throughout the toolkit that you can just adopt from each of those sections. In terms of deciding where to start, did like having the full toolkit and making a really good review of that, so that you have that holistic perspective and then be able to identify those medium-term goals. They also suggested that leadership should set the tone and provide context. I think this is a really important one, because one of the challenges that came up often through the capacity building program that we ran was that ESOs, sometimes a challenge was just having the buy-in from leadership. So sometimes it was a person who was working in a different part of the organization who's saying we should be doing this, but leadership wasn't really setting the tone and making it clear that this was an important priority. And so that I really agree with their advice here, that if you are leading your team or bringing this into your team and you're not a leader, getting leadership on board and letting them kind of lead it and prioritize it is really important. And then involving the whole team on the journey. So they talk about inclusive and radical openness. So really setting that tone and providing a safe space. There's lots of learnings here. I'm not going to read through everyone, but I do encourage you to go through the case studies, especially, this one, and there's many other case studies in there. We've got a case study on Vilgro, New Energy Nexus, who I know are both on the call. Lots of great case studies of how these organizations have applied the toolkit to their organization. I might stop there because I know we've only got about 20 minutes left, and I hope that that's enough time for questions. But let me know if I've missed anything or if there's any other questions.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. What a great intro to the GLIA toolkit. Awesome to also see the experience of exchange and how it's helped them and their operations. So we're opening the floor for any questions from the group on specific things that Caitlin mentioned, or if there's a request to kind of elaborate more on some of the stuff within the GLIA toolkit. Please raise your hand or just please unmute yourself and we can get started with the Q&A. Awesome. Marvin, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Hi, this is Marvin from New Energy Nexus. Thank you so much, Caitlin and Disa, for that. Such an interesting product, and also you, Trud. So my question is really around, I recognize that this is a tool that's probably been developed for Southeast Asia. If I'm correct in that understanding, I just want to know, how did you, as you develop this, how did you consider the different nuances of the different countries we have in Southeast Asia? So we obviously have to recognize that there are different needs in different countries in Southeast Asia. And I'm not from Southeast Asia, but I'm just thinking maybe that might be a factor. And how did you kind of develop this, knowing that there are different nuances from the different countries? And my second question is, can this be applied for different countries in Africa? I'm also curious about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Marvin. Great questions. And to answer your first question, in terms of the nuances for different countries, because we developed the toolkit in collaboration with all of these ESOs, that was definitely part of the conversation and testing the toolkit with each of these organizations to say, are there, additional things we need to think about or change or add here based on your context. So that definitely informed the design of the toolkit, some of the strategies or considerations that went into it. If I'm thinking about some of the examples that came up through like the capacity building program, I know one conversation that came up, I think potentially in Cambodia, or maybe, I can't remember actually the country, but was the concept of transgender entrepreneurs and the perception of that in different countries and the differences from country to country around that. And so I think that was definitely something that was considered in the toolkit. And also, I think there's other resources out there that are maybe more binary in terms of women and men. We really made a concerted effort, knowing the diversity and differences in culture to across those countries to make this about people of all genders, right? Rather than men and women. And so that was one, I guess, consideration that probably came out of some of those insights as well. I think that's really was a guiding principle from early on, but I actually wasn't part of the process of developing the toolkit. That was some of my other colleagues. I jumped in with the gender lens content, the gender measurement content, and then was running the capacity building program. So I actually wasn't part of those early conversations when the toolkit was being developed, but I sort of came on board after that and in the delivery of it. So I can't speak specifically to what bits of the toolkit were put in as, in response to those cultural differences, but that's kind of what I know from the conversations I was part of through the capacity building program. And in terms of your second question, can it be applied to other countries? I think 100%. I think while this was created with Southeast Asia in mind and in collaboration with Southeast Asian organizations, we also made an effort to make sure that it was, applicable to other countries, because we did see this as a first of its kind resource that we wanted to be, be able to be scaled and used globally. And I know from experience that we've had organizations from around the world using it and finding great value in applying it. I'm in Australia, I'm not in Southeast, and we use it in our organization. So I think for sure, and YGAP has offices in Africa, and we apply the same strategies in those contexts. I think the other benefit of the toolkit is it's really about asking the right questions of yourself and your team to understand what are the gender dynamics in my cultural context, and then coming up with a solution for those. So yes, those solutions might be different and some of those contexts might be different, but you're asking the same questions of your team, which I think makes it quite globally applicable.
Thank you so much.
Marvin. We have room for maybe 2 more questions from the group. Please feel free to raise your hand, or you can also leave it on the chat. Okay, I have a question, Caitlin. Well, Marvin has another. Go ahead, Marvin.
Sorry to hug up all the time. Maybe just a quick
Sorry.
follow-up is I'm from New Energy Nexus, so I wasn't really involved in the formation of this. So I'm literally hearing this for the first time. But my quick question is this free? Okay.
Yeah, so the GLIA toolkit is available.
The
right?
toolkit free, yes. And we do have other resources I did want to point out in terms of sort of next steps for you all. If you are interested in deepening your knowledge of the toolkit, or even starting to support others to use the toolkit, we have a train the trainer program, which we ran with Vilgro, and Vilgro ran with other organizations. So we've trained a number of organizations in how to train others to use the toolkit, and that curriculum is on the website. So if you are, as an organization, have been applying a gender lens for a while and would like to start helping other organizations in your community to apply a gender lens, for example, Marvin, if you know in Africa where you are, there's other organizations that are not doing this well, you can actually go through that train the trainer curriculum we have on the website and start supporting other organizations to use the toolkit in their organization. So that's just another, I guess, asset or resource there for you, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Thanks, Marvin. Do we have any more last questions from the group? Yes, Andy, please go ahead.
Hi, So I'm from Make Sense Asia, and I just wanted to ask, like, how do we actually measure, like, what's a metric for success for a successful incubation? I tried accessing here in the GLIA toolkit, but it appears that the link is broken, as you mentioned, since, it's shifted from another domain. So yeah, I'm just curious about that. Thanks.
And so you're wanting to know, how do we measure success of applying a gender lens?
Yes.
Yeah, so the link that I did go to, some of the links, like I said, are being updated, but there is a live working link for the gender metrics, which I showed in the walkthrough. So based on what it is that you're trying to achieve by applying a gender lens, you'll choose different metrics depending on what the problem is, or the outcome is that the problem you're trying to solve, or the outcome you're aiming to achieve. But if you're thinking kind of more broadly on, like, how do we become a gender smart organization? The other thing I wanted to point out is we as part of the community of practice that operated after the after the capacity building program, we developed something called minimum standards, and they're also linked in the toolkit. But I'll maybe share the link in the chat once I can grab it. But these minimum standards are sort of a list of kind of, okay, if you're just starting out, like what's the bare minimum we need to do and achieve in order to say that we're a gender smart organization. So I think that's another really helpful tool to be able to benchmark yourself, to say, like, well, okay, so we've been doing a little bit, but like, how successful are we? The gender minimum standards are a really good benchmark to say, cool, if we can tick these boxes and if we're achieving these outcomes, then we can kind of hand on heart say that we're gender smart. So I think that was a really good outcome of the community of practice.
So thanks, Andy. We have room for one more question if anybody has. Going once. Oh, I saw there was a comment from Alexander. The toolkit is fire. Definitely something we can browse through and learn a thing or two about inclusion. Smart tool will definitely apply it in our programs. Thank you so much. Thank you, Alexander, for your comment. Maybe if there's no more questions, Caitlin, I have one last. Like, if I were an ESO who was just getting started on their gender inclusion journey, and it's the GLIA toolkit is a vast resource, right? What would be a good plan of action to start? What would be a strategic place for me to kind of start to think about gender inclusion? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think number one, looking at that self-diagnosis tool to kind of just take stock of, like, what are we doing in our organization? And I think it's useful to do that as a team if you can, to sort of maybe you each do the self-diagnosis separately to see if you feel like you're landing in the same place, and then you come together and discuss it. And so number one, I would say the diagnosis, and then number two, I think just opening up space to have these conversations. So some of the organizations I know that that were new to applying a gender lens did something as simple as starting a Slack conversation thing around gender. And so they could start sharing resources, or having interesting conversations, or asking questions, or just having an open and honest forum to discuss gender within the organization. And I think that was an important, easy next step as well, is to just open up the floor for those conversations. And like Exchange did, bringing the team together to sort of say, look, this is important to us. How important, or like, where do we see this being, applying to our organization? Are there problems that we see within our organization around gender? What are those? Or do we feel like actually things are looking pretty good. And that self-diagnosis is where you can kind of have a guide to say, yeah, actually we are looking okay on some of these things, or actually there's a lot of gaps that we haven't even thought about, and maybe we need to be thinking about these things. So yeah, I'd say that's the easiest place to start. The other thing I will mention is in the toolkit, there is it's like an exercise sheet that takes you through a plan to a way to create your gender action plan. So that essentially helps you as a team identify, this is the problem we want to address. So maybe it is gender diversity on our team. We want more men, women, transgender, whatever you want to say in our team, wherever there's not that diversity. And then what's our objective? What does success look like? And then what are the strategies we're going to use to get there? So that there's a worksheet that can guide you through that process to create a little action plan for your team.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Caitlin. So really looking at the diagnosis first, opening up the conversation, and as what you mentioned, it's important. And I think with the group right now, a lot of them are within the leadership of the organization. So being the ones to kind of be the first movers to have gender inclusion be at the forefront of their programs will then be kind of the driver for them to further the gender inclusion in their operations and everything else. So definitely. And then the exercise as well. These are things that I think even for Pollinate, we will be taking so that we're also able to improve our gender inclusion within the organization. So awesome.
I will, if
yeah,
we've
go
got
ahead.
I will just say one other thing. You touched on it then, but it really does need like a champion within the organization. So if you are that person who is inspired today and thinking like this, I need to make sure that this happens in my organization, I really encourage you to be that champion, because like I said, sometimes leadership doesn't see it as a priority and needs that convincing. And we do have data in the toolkit to help you do that. There's also sometimes budgetary constraints and things like that. So those can be the barriers. But if you feel really passionate about it and can take it on as a cause that you want to see across the organization, and put a little pressure on leadership to make it happen and show the business case behind why we actually need to be doing this and how it will open up new funding opportunities and better, more diverse, more successful business, then I really encourage you to do that.
Great. So be the champion for gender inclusion in your own organizations. Awesome. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for taking us through the toolkit and for taking us through the case study. Thank you, Dissa, also for introducing us to Caitlin and for the toolkit as well. We hope everybody learned something new today. I saw Charlene just mention that, it was a great time to kind of grasp the toolkit much better now. And now that she's working in Vilgro, Philippines and running the programs herself. So hopefully we can say the same in a few months for the organizations here, that with the help of the GLIA toolkit, we'll see more success in terms of gender inclusion. This is only part 1 of our session, so we will have a part 2 that we are doing with Vilgro Philippines. We will definitely invite everybody here to come and join us. It might happen sometime next month. It will be a member benefit for Pollinate Impact Network members. So for those who aren't part yet, we'd love for you to apply for membership. I will send it in the thank you email. But for now, while I have all of you, if it's okay, I'm launching our feedback form to just gather some feedback on the session today and how might we improve our sessions in the future. So if you can take a few minutes to answer the feedback form, that would be lovely. While we have the audience answering, Dissa, Caitlin, do you have any last messages for the group before we end today?
I just wanted to say thank you, Caitlin. I'm also new to SPF, so I wasn't there when the Glia toolkit was developed, but I was benefited from the toolkit as I saw how we are able to support more partners who are using the toolkit. So here now I feel like with this opportunity hopefully we're able to reach more organizations to use the toolkit. So thank you so much, Caitlin, for taking your time and actually help us learn about the toolkit today. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Dissa. Caitlin, over to you.
Thanks, Dissa. No, I think I've said everything I wanted to say, but just a thanks again for everyone turning up today and being interested in learning more about this and applying it to your organization. And thanks especially to those organizations who were part of the toolkit. Obviously, we couldn't have done it without all of you. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And I do encourage you to keep us updated. If you have used the toolkit and found it really useful, shoot us an email and let us know, what the impact of that has been, because we love those stories and we would love to share that more widely as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks again to Dissa and Caitlin for today. And thank you everyone for joining us for this session. We hope to see you on the next one. And you all have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. See ya.
Bye.